Back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, British boxing had its golden era, a time when Saturday night fights weren't just sport, they were events. And at the center of it all, two men who couldn't have been more different, yet were destined to collide. Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn. Their rivalry wasn't just about titles or wins. It was a bitter clash of worlds, of mindsets, and of raw human spirit. It was explosive, gripping, and at times deeply personal. You could feel the tension even before the first punch was thrown. Their saga produced two of the most unforgettable nights in British sports history, nights that fans still talk about like they happened yesterday. Nigel Benn earned the nickname the Dark Destroyer, and he wore it like a badge of honor. A former soldier in the British Army, Benn fought the way he lived. All out, no hesitation, and absolutely fearless. He didn't just want to beat you, he wanted to break you. His style was relentless, savage, and often chaotic, but it worked. Benn overwhelmed opponents with his aggression, and once he had you hurt, he didn't let up. On the flip side, Eubank Sr. was almost the exact opposite. Calm, calculated, and impossibly composed, Eubank brought a theatrical flair into the ring that made some fans love him and others absolutely loathe him. With his perfectly tailored suits, aristocratic accent, and signature pose, he was more than a fighter. He was a performance artist. But underneath the showmanship was a man with elite defense, impeccable timing, and a chin forged in iron. He was infuriatingly slick and frustratingly difficult to figure out. Put the two of them in a ring together, and you had fireworks. Their first showdown went down on November 18, 1990, at the NEC in Birmingham, and the build-up was nothing short of electric. The air was thick with animosity. Benn and Eubank refused to be in the same room without it turning into a shouting match. They wouldn't shake hands. They wouldn't make peace. This wasn't one of those manufactured rivalries for the cameras. These two genuinely could not stand each other. Benn came in as the WBO middleweight champion, and Eubank was the unbeaten challenger, itching to dethrone him. The fight itself was an all-out war. Both men landed bombs. Eubank looked like he was on the brink at several points, but somehow he survived the storm, rallied, and stopped Benn in the 9th round. Benn slumped against the ropes, protested the stoppage, but the damage was done. Eubank had taken his title and a piece of his pride. Fast forward 3 years to October 9th, 1993. The rematch was set, this time in front of a massive crowd of 42,000 at Old Trafford. By now, both men were world champions in their own right. Benn held the WBC super middleweight belt, Eubank the WBO version. They were older, more experienced, and if anything, even more determined. But the second fight took a different tone. It was still intense, still fueled by personal disdain, but this time it was more tactical. Both men respected each other's power now, and neither wanted to make the first fatal mistake. It went the distance, 12 full rounds of tense, grinding, strategic boxing. When the final bell rang, no one knew who had edged it. The judges called it a split draw. The crowd was stunned. Neither fighter celebrated. It felt unfinished, and that's exactly how it remains to this day. Despite the draw, the second fight didn't cool the rivalry. If anything, it cemented it. The fact that they never had a third bout only added to the mystique. Fans debated endlessly about who would have won if they ran it back one last time. But in a strange twist, time softened the edges of their hatred. As the years rolled by, Benn and Eubank came to acknowledge the toll those battles took on them, not just physically but emotionally. They didn't just fight each other. They exposed parts of themselves that only war can reveal. Over time, a strange kind of respect began to form. Maybe not friendship, but a bond forged in blood and sweat. You can see it in interviews today. There's a knowing look in their eyes, a shared history that no one else can understand. And just when you thought the story had reached its end, a new chapter began to tease itself into existence. Their sons, Chris, Eubank Jr. and Connor Benn, have both stepped into the spotlight, promising echoes of their father's legacies. There's been talk, there's been tension, and fans are desperate to see if the new generation can live up to the old. In 2022, a bout between Eubank Jr. and Benn Jr. was scheduled, only to be derailed at the last minute due to a failed drug test. It was a gut punch to fans, a cliffhanger that left everyone wondering what could have been. The build-up had all: The makings of a blockbuster and its sudden collapse only added to the intrigue. Even now, the possibility of that fight happening still hangs in the air, tantalizing and unfinished. But whether the sons ever square off or not, nothing can touch the original rivalry. Benn vs. Eubank wasn't just about boxing. It was about identity, pride, class, and fire. It tapped into something primal and real. They made each other better, fiercer, more complete fighters, and in doing so, they gave British boxing something it hadn't seen in decades. A rivalry so rich in drama and so full of passion that it crossed over into mainstream culture. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a side. And even now, decades later, those two nights remain etched in the minds of everyone who witnessed them. Because that's what true rivalries do. They transcend the sport and become legend. The atmosphere at Old Trafford that night in October 1993 was something out of a movie. Thousands of fans roaring under the floodlights, the tension so thick it practically crackled in the air. Benn and Eubank weren't just fighting for belts. They were battling for legacy, for bragging rights, for something deeper than mere titles. You could feel the weight of history in every punch thrown, every slip, every feint. And even though the fight didn't produce a definitive winner, it felt monumental. The decision, a split draw, was met with mixed emotions. Some thought Benn had edged it. Others leaned toward Eubank. But one thing was clear. They had delivered another unforgettable war. The kind of fight that sticks with you, that gets talked about in pubs decades later. It's funny in hindsight how much those two needed each other. Eubank was always the slick showman, a puzzle in the ring, but without someone like Benn, the snarling, unrelenting force across from him, he might never have fully etched himself into the hearts of fight fans. And Benn, for all his explosive power and thrilling aggression, was given a villain to his hero arc in Eubank. Or, depending on who you asked, the other way around. That's the beauty of their rivalry. It wasn't black and white, it was complex. Fans were fiercely divided, and that division fueled the fire. You were either Team Benn or Team Eubank. There was no middle ground. Outside the ring, their personalities clashed just as violently. Benn was direct and raw, unfiltered in his disdain. Eubank, by contrast, often carried himself with a smugness that bordered on theatrical. He'd stroll into press conferences with an air of aristocracy, sometimes donning a monocle or cane, speaking in clipped, deliberate tones that infuriated his opponents. It was all part of the persona, and it worked. Fans tuned in as much to see who'd win as they did to witness the drama between rounds. Promoters couldn't have written a better script if they tried. These two men were lightning in a bottle, and they set British boxing on fire every time they shared a ring. And as the years rolled on, something unexpected happened. The venom that once fueled their hatred slowly transformed into a strange sort of mutual appreciation. Not friendship exactly, but recognition. They understood each other in a way only two warriors who've shared that kind of battlefield could. They knew what it meant to stand toe-to-toe with someone just as determined, just as stubborn, just as proud. It's why, in later interviews, both men have spoken about their rivalry with a mix of respect and reverence. The pain, the glory, the sacrifices. They were shared experiences that bonded them for life, even if they'd never admitted outright. Now, decades later, a new generation is flirting with the idea of picking up where their fathers left off. Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn have both carved out names for themselves in the sport. And every time they're mentioned in the same breath, fans can't help but wonder if history is about to repeat itself. It's poetic, really. Sons carrying the weight of their fathers' legacies, trying to forge their own paths while being compared to icons. And while nothing can ever truly replicate the firestorm that was Eubank versus Benn, the idea of a continuation adds another layer of intrigue. It reminds us that boxing isn't just about wins and losses, it's about stories. And few stories are as compelling, as raw, or as unforgettable as this one.